Hi, this is Marlene, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found on miamighostchronicles.com. Go to marlenepardo.com for information on new book releases. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and can also be listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests on the show. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit Strange Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com or find us on Blogspot. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing today? Good, I hope. I'm doing well. As you could tell, I have the little mutts, all the little mutts in here with me in my office. And you might ask, pray tell, Marlene, why do you have all the little mutts in your office? As you get Jinjin. He's one of my rescues that, even though he's in a big pack, he doesn't play well with others. He wants everything for him, but, I'm sure anybody that has pets or children can relate to that. But anyway, yeah, we have him in there because my husband's bringing in groceries, and if not, they'll just get under him. So he says, I'm going to put him in your office for a bit. So, of course, if you hear all the strange noises, you guys have heard it before. That's just them. Yeah. But anyway, and everything has been good here. Dodging a lot of rainy weather because, of course, in Central and North Florida, we're in the rainy season, in the thick of it. No more disasters with mud pies. Because of those, see what I mean? And there's my other grouchy girl, Slim. Cut it out. That's another rescue. But anyway, just a lot of mud. I hate to say it, but yeah. So anyway, guys, but let's get on to the good part. I'm not even going to talk about the weather. I'm not even going to talk about the chickens. I'm not going to talk about anything. And yes, and that's a squeaky toy from who needs children? Just get pets. They follow you everywhere. They're underneath. They make a lot of noise at inappropriate times, like squeaking on their toys and snarling. Hey, Jinjin. And for those of you who have been around for a while, you know where that name comes from, right? Jinjin. That was from the I Dream of Jeannie show when they had a little dog. His name was Jinjin. That's what he's named after. In case any of you, I'm not talking about the Jin, like, okay. People, there's no sinister. This is an I Dream of Jeannie throwback. Okay, let me get on to the good part, guys. And this is a guest. This is the first time that he's been here on Stories of the Supernatural. And I know a lot of you are going to be thrilled to hear that I've brought somebody back who's a psychic, because a lot of you ask that I bring on psychics. And his name is Jason Zook. He's a spiritual medium. And I've explained to you before what the difference is between that and a regular psychic, but we'll get into that later on again. Okay, he's been providing accurate, intuitive advice and guidance within many different social contexts since August of 2004. He relies upon intuition to forge connections to the other side in order to offer unique healing experience for those who seek communication with their departed loved ones. In January of 2017, he decided to offer intuitive guidance professionally, so he can further provide clients with a chance to gain insight on matters within their life, which require further attention, and by working with others to confront existing obstacles and challenges. He provides clarity, reassurance to those who seek advice. You can schedule an appointment with him, and I'm going to have this information, by the way, in the credits of the show. We'll repeat it at the end of the show, but he also has a podcast called the Social Psychic Radio Show on Apple Podcasts and other platforms. And he also has a YouTube channel for all things spiritual and which promote mind, body, and health wellness. Help me welcome Jason. Jason, how are you doing today?
What a beautiful introduction. Thank you, Marlene, for having me.
That's all about you. So that's good. That's good.
I appreciate it. I have to say that our interaction with each other between my interview and then doing this with you, it's like, it's fun. It's just, this
I
is
know,
why
it's
we
great.
live.
I really enjoyed speaking with you the last time. And by the way, for those of you, I went on his podcast show like 2 weeks ago or something
Yes.
like that. Sometimes I lose track, and it was great. And I'm telling you, yeah, we had a lot of behind the scenes conversations and laughs about things because he's on the money about so much. But anyway, Jason, I know all my audiences, whenever I bring a psychic, they want to find out how did you realize that you were psychic?
Sure.
I know some people have it from childhood, and you have the ones that have a traumatic head injury, and then they become psychic. What happened with you?
I think it really is in my DNA. My grandmother was very intuitive and psychic growing up, and my mom was a reluctant psychic. So when I was a little kid, I had deja vu moments as a kid. I remember I grew up in the 80s, and I remember telling my mom and my grandmother, I felt like we'd done this before.
Really?
And my grandmother pulled me aside because she was very in touch with her psychic abilities. And she said, this runs in our family. Don't talk to people about it. They'll never understand it, and just keep it to yourself. It's a gift, but you don't need to be public about it because society will never understand it. So for a good 20-something years, I kept it to myself. And when I got to law school and college, more so law school, I started getting premonitions about things. Like I was with some friends studying a study group, and I remember telling one of my close friends, your girlfriend, I think she's cheating on you. I think you're going to find a condom wrapper in the bathroom at some point when you go away.
Oh my God.
You know what's crazy? He and I went away on a trip to Tampa because I was in Fort Lauderdale for law school. And guess what? He found that exact condom wrapper after we got back from our trip. So there were moments back then. And I remember one time.
Said, he must have. So you were not, that was like on the money. That was like.
Yeah,
wow.
He stayed with her another 2 years. And then after that made a decision to get divorced. But I started getting stuff like that all the time. And then when my grandfather passed away in August 12th, 2004, we're coming up on the anniversary next week, he died. And when he died, I always had a premonition that I'd be by myself with no one to consult me about his death because my grandfather was my father figure. And so his passing was a big event for me at the time. I didn't realize it in the sense that it made me become a psychic medium. A spiritual awakening happened at his death. I always had that premonition. I'd be by myself with no one to console me for 7 years. I told everyone about it. Then my grandfather in 2004 had a stroke, and he was up in New Jersey, and I got to see him the day after his stroke, but he was unconscious at that point. And I just remember his hands were communicating with me a certain way. And I broke down crying, and I was real emotional. And then I went to Wisconsin. And in Wisconsin, I wound up, I had to go back to Tampa. I wound up in Wisconsin, and in Wisconsin for a deposition, I was told, my mom told me that night on August 12th that my grandfather passed, so I wouldn't be able to get back to New Jersey to see him. So I collapsed in the bed. And I sat back and I thought to myself, what does this mean? It is true. The premonition came real. I'm by myself in the middle of Baraboo, Wisconsin, stranded with the flight canceled. No one to console me. My grandfather dies. Pivotal moment in my life. Wow. Orbs of light appear in the hotel room, like an Unsolved Mysteries episode. Orbs of light appear. And as they appear, my grandfather, a wave of unconditional love washes over me. And my grandfather tells me in some way, telepathically, whatever, son, I love you. Don't ever worry about me. Go get something to eat for yourself, and I will always be here with you. I love you. So I got up, went and got food. My best friend from high school calls me and says, hey, how's your grandfather? I go, he died. What do you mean he died? You're not upset? I'm like, well, why would I be upset? And she's like, Jason, where are you? do you need us to come find you? And I was like, actually, I'm in Baraboo, Wisconsin. She's like, wait, you're where? I thought you were in Tampa. I go, no, I got sent up there for my boss cover deposition. She's like, oh my God, your premonition came true. I was like, yeah. And at that moment, I could sense that she was skeptical. For the first moment, my psychic abilities were telling me something that my physical senses didn't. So I said to her, Tracy, if you're skeptical about my grandfather's death, what about your grandmother? She died 6 months ago. What if she could say something to you right now? And she goes, well, she's not going to be able to do that. She's been dead for 6 months. And without saying anything, without noticing anything, I said, well, your grandmother would probably say that she used to tuck you in at night for 6 years of your childhood when you were in the Poconos in the mountains. And she used to take you there. And she used to take the covers up to your head, kiss you on the forehead, and say, don't let the bed bugs bite after reading you a story. And you know how you could drop the mic? My friend dropped the phone. I heard clunk. And I was like, what's going on? And then I remember her future husband picks up the phone and says, what did you just say to Tracy? And I'm like, why? She's in the bathroom crying right now. And I'm like, what? So then she picks up the phone afterwards and she's like, how did you know that? I go, no, what? She goes, my grandmother did used to tuck me in at night for 6 years of my life in the Poconos. We would stay with her every summer. My mom and dad worked. And guess what? She kissed me on the forehead and she would say, don't let the bed bugs bite as a joke. And that freaked me out.
Yeah, it's like, man, I didn't know that. Isn't it incredible when it validates for you as well?
Oh, well, first off, at that point, I didn't even know what I was. So I freaked out. I'm in this foreign state, not in another country, but I'm in the middle
I know, but it's, yeah.
I left the lights on. Let's just say it like that. I slept with the lights on for a good 10 years.
It's like, hey, no more visitors, please. No more messages.
Exactly.
Let me ask you, Jason, do you ever see them? Because I hear of psychic, especially mediums, that basically, before they know how to put up a barrier, if you want to, they actually have dead people, spirits coming. The ones that want to communicate, they come to them and they can see them.
I can tell you this. They were more pranksters with me, because I think being a medium, when you're new to it, you don't know how to put up boundaries with spirits.
Right.
And I was like a lighthouse, or like whatever you want to call it. And I would sleep in my room. And I remember this so vividly. I was traveling for work because I used to be, I'm a lawyer in 5 states. So I used to go to different storm events. And I was in Texas at the time in 2011. And I remember I'm sleeping on the bed, tired from working a long day as a lawyer. And all of a sudden my arm goes like up in the air. And then my leg up in the air. And I'm like waking up like that, going, what the heck is going on? One time I got pushed to the side and I was just like, what is this? And then finally I met a psychic who told me, you need to button yourself up at night. And I started to learn these like grounding things and things that you could tell people, like spirits, I'm not ready to deal with you right now until we're ready to talk. Leave me my privacy. I need to live. And so those boundaries helped a lot. I've heard that sometimes at the very beginning, people get like overwhelmed. I was. And I used to sleep. I still sleep with the door locked in my room, just because that's just the thing for me. I seal off the door spiritually in my mind, and I create
physically do it. How about the closet door?
Closet doors don't bother me, but I'm going to tell you this. I've had situations where I'd close the door and I wouldn't lock it, and I'd have like my mom come visit me or a friend come visit, and for some reason I'd wake up and the door's open, right? Somehow the door is open at 3 a.m. and I wake up at 3 a.m. and I'm like, why am I waking up in the middle of the night? I never wake up. And then I notice anytime the door's ever open in my room, I get disturbed in the middle of the night, whatever, 2, 3, 4. Mm-hmm. So I close the door and I seal up and I meditate and I say prayers and I fall asleep.
Yeah, believe it or not, that's your subconscious mind. It hears it. There's something that pulls you out of sleep, because for you, that's your.
You know what? I'm not afraid of it anymore. When I first started out, I was afraid. I just think spirits see us as somebody they can communicate with, connect to us, that they think that we can then link them up with their loved one that's left, kind of thing, or give them a message that needs to be shared. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just, and it depends also on your sensitivity. Sometimes you see what they look like, what they felt, whatever their state of mind was, or even physically. I've heard some mediums will actually get physically affected.
I do.
You do?
I have situations where I've channeled during readings. This has happened last year with the pandemic. I work on a lot of virtual readings and Zoom readings and phone readings. And I will actually get on the phone with someone whose son died, for example. A sister and a mother on the phone with me in the car, and they did a Zoom call. Not a Zoom call, they did a FaceTime call. And I got up and I started walking around because it was on my phone. I started pacing from room to room to room. And I'm like, okay, is your son a pacer? Was he someone that used to walk around and the mother started bawling and the sister started laughing? So one's crying, one's laughing, because the sister knew exactly what her brother was doing to communicate to the mother about how she used to always yell at him for pacing, because they used to have a landline phone back in the day.
Oh my God.
A long cord, and when he would pace, he would stretch the cord out. So when I brought that up and I picked up his mannerisms of his nervous energy, walking around, being this and that, they were like, that's him. So I could pick up mannerisms and personalities. On occasion.
What's really funny is my middle son, he does exactly what you just described. If he's on a phone call or he paces back and forth. And sometimes I thought, you're driving me crazy. Sit down. And he can't. He's like, I don't know, like the thinking mechanism works better with a walking thing engaged. I don't know.
Funniest thing for me is when I give readings, normally if I'm on a Zoom call, I can't go walk around. So I'll be But when I do the phone readings, I will have that situation when they're a pacer and they walk on the phone and they're pacing. I start doing the same during the reading. It's so interesting how that happens.
I know how those things bleed over, which is so intimate about that person.
Yes.
See what I'm saying? That's something about them that usually validates it a lot for the person. And have you ever had somebody come through, like, because In other words, let's say somebody wants a reading with this specific person, but somebody else comes through because they want to talk to your client. You know, they want to elbow the other person out of the way.
I tell people all the time, don't predict, even though readings happen, you can't predict if, especially for mediumship, you can't predict you're going to get so-and-so at so-and-so time at that moment when you're in front of them. Because with readings, it's whatever the spirit world wants to relay, and it's what the universe wants to relay. So there's messages that come through that people don't necessarily anticipate. And I will tell people, if you're going to come for a mediumship reading, just keep an open mind, because you're the receiver. I'm just an instrument, right? And the spirit is the one that's sharing the message. So it's a three-way communication that has to happen. And you can't come in with just one paradigm and not expect it to be different than what it might be.
Right. And sometimes people don't realize that perhaps this other spirit may want to, maybe it's the right time for them to talk to that client, and they don't care. And you're there, like you said, being the instrument. And they're like, I don't care if they came to talk to so-and-so. I'm going to get my 2 cents worth in because, you know, whatever it is.
I will give you a flip story, flip side of it. I had a client a couple years ago, because I've only been doing this professionally for 4 years, but I had a client a couple years ago come with their mother and daughter team. I call it that because I had previously read for the daughter, but then the mother and daughter came and wanted it on a specific Sunday in August. So let's say it's 3 years ago now. So I meet them at my law office after hours, and I have a reading with both mother and daughter. Well, as I'm reading, I figured out that they did that date and time because that's the 30th anniversary of when the husband and father killed himself. And so they wanted to know specifically during that reading, and it was supposed to be an hour, why did you kill yourself? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? I take
it he didn't leave a note, huh?
He didn't leave a note, but guess what? He came through and wanted to ask for forgiveness. They both validate. In fact, they know it was him because the stuff he came up with, only they know. But they started yelling and screaming, and it was not the way a normal reading goes. So I stopped the reading 10 minutes out, and I said, listen, you guys need to go to a counselor before you come to someone like me. Because if you're coming to a medium and you're going to start yelling at me as if I'm the person that you're wanting to talk with.
And how long had it been?
10 minutes. Oh, 30 years. 30 year anniversary to the date and time he was dead.
But you mean 30 years? I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand that if maybe they didn't, but 30 years is a long time to be.
I know it is. Well, first off, the daughter was like 30 and a half. So she was like a baby when he died.
Right. Okay.
The mother was just angry and hostile towards me. And I was like, this isn't going to go.
But why would they? Were they mad at him?
Yeah, they're mad. I guess they wanted to talk to him, but when he came through and they started realizing that, especially the mother, when she realized her husband was coming through, all the emotions of what happened when he died, and he left her with the baby, and it was a hard life. And I understand it, but keep in mind, I'm only a medium. I was blindsided by that. And that's like one of the stories I tell people not to do with a psychic medium. Don't blindside your medium.
Right, of course not. But yeah, they sound like they had issues, and probably the daughter got him from the mom, and who knows? Yeah, that must have been a tough call. But 30 is just a long time not to make peace with something as much as
important as
you can make with that.
And he's coming through, and you know what he's saying? Please forgive me. I love you both. Please forgive me. I suffered from severe mental depression. I was a combat veteran. I had all this PTSD back then. I'm sorry. And she wouldn't accept it. She wouldn't accept the apology. She wouldn't accept the forgiveness. It happens when anyone's ready, but that was shocking to me personally.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know what? I think also sometimes when people go to get a reading and they want, let's say, like you said, a specific person, sometimes that spirit might not be ready to communicate either. It's like a two-way street. You know, they expect that spirit or whoever it is that they want to is going to be available or wanting it, but they might not be for a lot of reasons. They might be working out their own things over there.
You're right about that. And I'll say this. It's not like it's a cell phone. Psychics are AT&T. Sometimes I feel like I am in a way as a joke. I'm like, but it's a creative process, and there's interpretation involved. And it's like for me, when I do mediumship, I tell people it's like charades. I have to interpret what's being shared, and then you have to interpret what I'm interpreting. So it's like there's room for error. So you got to make sure you're focused and that you're responsive to when you do have spirit coming through.
Yeah, and believe it or not, I wouldn't be surprised if that example that you gave, who knows if prior to you, they had probably gone to other psychics and he didn't show up thinking, oh no, they're too mad still. In other words,
that was a tense one for me. Out of the thousands of readings I've probably done in the last 4 years, I'll have to say maybe average about that.
You were like, oh, okay, no.
I was like, oh, next time they call, I have to remember who they are.
Exactly right.
And boundaries before we start.
Some people, yeah, it's like, let me say the mean thing. No wonder the guy committed suicide. I'm only kidding, but not really.
That's rough, yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like, if this is like, okay, like, lady, do you hold grudges or what? I mean, but yeah.
Let's just say the energy needed to be grounded. Let's just say it nicely like that. Their energy needed to be grounded, and it wasn't grounded when they came to see me.
But yeah, and it's almost like you said, sometimes it's like, how much did you love this person? Or are you more mad because maybe he did leave you with all these responsibilities, maybe left you, high and dry, and it was a difficult, besides emotional and economically, it was difficult for you.
Suicide's a tragedy in all its forms, and I feel horrible for what happened.
Yes, it's across the board. But yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, Jason, because a lot of people that sometimes look or consider doing psychic work, if they have that ability, they kind of sometimes don't realize that, not that there's a downside, but you got to be prepared to do readings where things can go sideways.
I'll say this to you right now. I'm at the pinnacle right now for my psychic business, where I have a lot of podcasting I'm doing, my lawyering during the day, and then I have readings. So it's like I had to figure out how to do my schedule where I can't just switch hats from lawyer, podcaster, and psychic in an hour. I did that last week once, and it was dizzying for me. Like, I was making some business calls for my law firm, and then I'm looking at my calendar. Oh, it's 6 o'clock. I have an episode to do an interview for. Oh, it's 7 o'clock. I got a reading. And I literally did that, and I was exhausted. So I paced it. So now my schedule, the way it works, I'll do readings one night, but I'll have like 3 or 4 readings in a night, and then I have interviews. So I've been pacing myself. But to do all that like that, it takes a lot to be able.
It does.
And you know this. Anyone who schedules a reading, you got to be at your best. If I'm having an off day, I'll usually cancel a reading because I don't want to read for anyone unless I'm in my best.
Yes. And how about, have you ever gotten, let's say, for example, you've got a reading the next day. Have you ever gotten any visitations from the day before or that
I have some interesting stories that are on point with that, but not necessarily where I read for somebody. Okay. I had a situation where I met somebody and we wound up becoming friends, and this person's aunt attached to me and communicates with me, I would say, in dreams. I've never met this person, but I'll say that it's interesting. Sometimes the spirit world tries to bring people together, even if they're just friends. Like, there's things that happen with people's relatives that I'll pick up on, and then I'll bring it up to the person who's, alive, that's left behind.
Right.
And a lot of the times I bring up the details, and they're like, well, why are they telling you that? Why is my aunt telling you that? Or why is my grandmother speaking to you about a Christmas ornament that I've misplaced last year? And I always tell people, the things I get and the information that comes through is meant to be shared because the spirit that comes through it finds it important to them. And I always honor that. I always look at that. And basically, I will honor when people come through and share their information. I'll relay it to the loved one because I feel like even if it's a small message, no message is small. They took the energy to relay it across from where they are to where we are, to me, to them, to the recipient. So there's always a reason.
Exactly. Right. And when we spoke the last time, you mentioned that you also have done readings on what are called cold cases.
Yes.
Right. Where you're getting, well, imagine, let me ask you something, because we were talking about this the last time, the people that, how can I say it? It's suspected that they're dead. You see what I'm saying?
It's hard. I'll give you a really strong example when I first started out my mediumship abilities. Stacy Peterson is one of the people who disappeared in, I think it's Illinois. Her husband killed her after killing a prior wife. There's a
I know exactly which one you're. Yes.
I'm in Mississippi and I'm working on Hurricane Katrina cases, and I'm writing an email to one of my old law partners at the time. And as I'm writing the email, there's a TV program on in the background talking about her disappearance at the time. And as I'm writing my email, the email is from her now. She intercedes in my email, interrupts it, and I start writing about her. And I wrote, I think it was like 4 long transcriptions of information she relayed to me. And the basic substance of what she had to say was, he took me, he hit me in the head. He took my body and he buried it under the gymnasium of the elementary school a few blocks from my house. And I didn't know any of that. So I shared it with my brother. My brother Googles it. He finds out there's an elementary school where they put an additional place, because what she told me was that he put her under the addition. They built an addition to the gym, and he put her under the foundation before they laid the concrete. And so anyway, I have these emails that I typed up, and then I reformatted them, and then I sent them to the Illinois State Police right after it happened in 2008. Never heard from them. My point in sharing that is I had another case with Jennifer Kessie in 2017 with my best friend Megan, who's very intuitive and very into cold cases. And she and I worked on this thing for a good year and a half, and we submitted our documentation to the Orlando police. And once again, we never heard anything. And I'm okay with that. I relay the information I get on certain cold cases when they come through very strong. Jennifer Kessie came through very strong, and that information's on my YouTube channel. And then the Stacy Peterson one, this is the first time I'm bringing that up since 2008. I have never gone public about it.
Well, I remember that case, the problem they were having is that they couldn't find her body.
Her body is in between the plumbing pipes of the elementary school underneath the macadam, which is where the gym is, because she told me last year, she told me that she hears sneakers, like basketball sneakers and flushing of toilets. So I believe that she's buried in the pipes, in between the pipes somehow.
You do remember that case at the beginning? They believed it was him.
It is him.
But they couldn't. You remember at the very beginning of the case?
You can't find the body. Yeah,
they couldn't find her. It was like, is she really dead, or did she?
She's really dead. My feeling is she's dead. He hit her over the head with a blunt object. He put her body and wrapped it in a carpet, and then drove her in the middle of the night to the elementary school where the construction site was. Put her body there, wrapped it.
He probably scoped it out and knew.
Oh yeah, he was a police officer. You know, he knows how to do that stuff.
And he already had a wife that died, a prior wife, white or something. He had
when
another.
People are
wife.
evil. They're evil.
No, the guy was
sad.
And it's like, yeah. And I have heard of, for some reason, the smart ones, because they're not as smart, despite what we think. A lot of these psychopaths, they do look for places like that where there's construction to dispose of bodies, because
how are they going to dig it up? Right?
Who's going to tear up? Who's sometimes how they find remains, somebody stumbles on it, a hunter, somebody mowing grass. But let's face it, you don't have to worry about it if this person is buried in the foundation of a building. It's like, you're off the hook. What is it?
Yeah, I mean, there's ways they could go about it. They do GPR, or they like an MRA type of device where they do radar, ground penetrating radar over the structure. But the honesty is, when you're looking at pipes and you're looking at those kind of things, and this has been over 11 years.
Yeah. It's like, it's much more difficult than, because sometimes, they dump these bodies, and then years afterwards, somebody actually stumbles across what was left of this person. And,
it's so tragic.
Well, I mean, tell you, sometimes, as cold-blooded as it is, and I'm gonna say that there's people that you think it makes you wonder how long and we'll use the example of Stacy. How long was she married to this guy before she started to realize?
Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head
what she had on her hands. Like, how do you get away from somebody that you realize, oh my God?
I think with her, if I recall correctly, it's been a number of years. I think she was younger than him, and I feel like there was an imbalance in the relationship because of the age difference. Mm-hmm. So I think he purposely found the type of person that he could use his, manipulative abilities on. It's tragic. It really is. Right.
That it's like, I've got the upper hand here across the board. Yeah, they do that. They do that. And, but what was he finally convicted of? I think, wasn't it the
murder of the first wife, I believe.
Of the first wife, right? I knew that there was something there. Yeah. Well, because he had gotten away with it. And I think that they went and they started, I don't know if they reopened the case, but I remember that. But, and you hear, sometimes when you see these crime shows, it's almost like they become overconfident, especially those things where they do away with a spouse, because then you realize, hey, this is not the first time that they get rid of somebody, and they got away with it the first time, and they keep, I can do this again. Then they get overconfident and greedy.
There's one, I had a recent interview with the son of his father killed his mother and killed his stepmother. Horrible story. And one of the things I picked up from it, Todd Bozkowski, sorry, I said it right. He showed me the human side of this. When you deal with the tragedy and the family's left behind, like the son of a parent that kills a parent, or it's It's a lot. It's a lot to think about. We don't think of that. And he was telling me about true crime stories. They did a documentary for him, and the people who were doing the documentary had insensitivity towards his personal emotions of what he went through as a child with the death of his mom and stepmom. And I just find that the sensationalism with that and true crime stuff, they need to like really take into account the human side of these things.
Oh, sure.
And do it in a way where they portray it right. That turned my stomach when I heard that the other day. I was like, wow. So you're telling me basically.
They realized that as horrible as the crime as far as the victims, let's say the victims as in the ones that were killed, there's other victims as well, which are the ones that are left behind, which are alive. Those are victims as well.
Exactly.
It's just not the ones that get killed. As a matter of fact, I had my daughter when she was a teenager. She had a girlfriend, they were good friends. This girl was over at my house. Only child. Her dad was a corrections officer. And, her parents, everything fine. And I remember her telling me, so-and-so, her parents are really strict, especially her dad. And her dad's really mean sometimes because he doesn't let her and her mom do anything. Make a long story short. I can't remember exactly what the triggering event was, but he ended up killing her mom and himself. Okay. But, all the signs were there as far as the personality and all that, that control.
I think you just never think it's going to happen to you.
Right.
Right? Because most of us are insulated from that in our minds. We don't think that kind of tragedy could take place with someone that we know, someone close to us that's going to flip and commit homicide.
Yes, exactly. And that was the, and like I said, because by the time he did that, my daughter and her had drifted off a little bit. And I don't know exactly because, sometimes it's an event that triggers them to do that, whether it's the other person wants to leave the marriage or, there's a bunch of different reasons why that happens. Yeah, they it's like, you don't want to be with me. Well, I'm not going to let you be happy and, and live your life without me being, making your life a living hell. So yes, it's what they call, family annihilators. They usually take out as, even the children, but yes, there is something to, and sometimes it's really weird exactly what goes on in the minds of some of these people.
Oh yeah.
That they see basically another person as property, and I know people have a hard time, conceiving of that, but that's really unhealthy. How they see it.
It's an unhealthy model, and people who are not properly balanced then try to, do that. It's not right.
Well, you know what? It's also that, there's a lot of manipulation and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of that that goes on, and look, sometimes it ends bad and sometimes it ends good. And a lot of the work that I did once upon a time when I worked with a lot of victims of domestic violence.
Wow.
And that's why I understand. And I saw that a lot as far as the manipulation and intimidation and things like that, and the psychological aspect of it. And even including what you just talked about, the threats of, I'm going to do this. And a lot of them don't ever think that person is going to actually do it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like you just don't anticipate that that's going to be the way that this is going to wind up.
Right. Even as bad as that person has behaved, you never think that person is actually going to commit an atrocity of killing the person. But yeah, it's really, that's a whole, it's very dark. But I agree with you. A lot of the crime shows, sometimes they forget that the people that are left behind, and there's people out there, I know they make peace with it, but I don't think that's ever something you get over.
Correct.
You see what I'm saying? For the rest of your life.
You're never going to let go of that negative. You'll be able to let go of the negativity, but you'll never forget the pain you went through.
Right, exactly.
And it's a life-changing experience. I'm sure it's going to change the way you connect with people after that.
Sure, of course it does. Of course it does.
It's traumatic. You could just see the trauma that would be created for somebody to have that happen in their life and survive that.
Yes. And I'll tell you this much, when something like that, when a person experiences that, regardless of what age they are, but especially if you're younger, you have this, that like what you just described, where people live in this, this reality where bad things like that can't happen. Once that happens to you in your life, you let go of that, because you know something like this can happen.
Exactly. And then it's hard for you to trust and be vulnerable to people again.
Sure. Absolutely. Let me ask you, have you ever, and I'm going to say, because I know, and I'm not going to mention shows, but have you ever been walking around and felt compelled to give somebody information from a departed one?
Yes. And
let's hear it. And have you acted on it, or have you been like, I can't?
I did. It was one of the, I'll give you an example. I was on an airplane flying around. I used to be a jet setter back in the day, flying between Tampa, Texas, and New Jersey, and a few other places. And I remember I was like, at this point, I know I'm a psychic medium, but I'm still in the psychic closet. I'm not open about it.
Right.
It's just something I'm aware of. You go through that stage. And so I'm sitting on this plane with my lawyer hat on, and I'm sitting there, and the woman next to me, where I had to fly from from Florida with a layover in Charlotte for an hour and then fly up to New Jersey for Sandy case, Superstorm Sandy. And I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting next to this woman, and she's so soft-spoken, and she's dressed well, and I picked up on her daughter, and her daughter kept telling me, we're like 32,000 feet in the air. We just ascended. You could take your seatbelt off at this time.
Right.
And I'm 32,000 feet in the air, and the daughter's coming through to tell me, you need to tell my mom that when she goes to the house, to let her keep the picture that has to do with the seascape. And I'm like, I have no idea what this is. I have no idea what this is. And for the first 45 minutes, I didn't say a word. Finally, we're starting to go like descend. And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do this. She's loud to me. I better respect her wishes. Meaning the daughter. And I looked at the mother and I said, very casually, nonchalant, I said, oh, North Carolina is a beautiful place. I go, I went there for a wedding last year on the beach. Because I knew when she said seascape, there might be something. If I brought up something, it might trigger her.
Right.
Mother. So when I said beach, the mother goes, oh, yes, I live in North Carolina. There's a summer house I'm going to look at. We're selling it, and I'm going to gather my things. My daughter just died of cancer. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And she's like, yeah, my daughter actually went there a year ago when she went through her divorce. I told her, stay at the beach house. So my daughter went to the beach house, and she spent 2 weeks there. And when I got there, she painted these lovely seascape pictures, like landscape.
Oh, my God.
And I sit there, and I said, seascape? She goes, excuse me? I said, I bet you anything, from what you're describing, your daughter would probably want you to keep those pictures, those paintings. And she said, seascape, huh? I said, yeah. And she's like, my daughter painted a painting and called it seascape. And I said, well, I'm a psychic medium. I'm also a lawyer. I'm not trying to shock you here, but your daughter wants me to tell you to keep the painting. And she said, she started tearing up, and she goes, that painting helped get her through her crisis with her divorce. That painting, she said, she spent a couple of days of her trip reminiscing and creating and sitting on the beach. And she goes, when you look at it, it looks like a basic photo, but it's beautiful to me because my daughter painted it. She had artistic abilities. Anyway, a couple weeks later, I get an email with a screenshot, a picture from her, back then the cell phone was like, of the seascape, and the mother thanking me that she took the seascape back with her back to I think it was Clearwater.
There you go. Wow.
There's an example, but there's thousands of those kind of examples that happen. When I'm in an Uber,
you know what? I can see the position that you're in at the same time. It's like, what if I tell this to this woman and she doesn't, you never know how people are going to react.
The fear was, what if I tell this woman 32,000 feet in the air about her daughter? And what if she has like a hypersensitive breakdown and I'm going to be on CNN for a moment of this guy upsetting this mother grieving about her daughter.
Yeah.
Luckily, it didn't happen like that, and my spirit guides led me in the right direction. But you're right. There's a responsibility as a psychic. You got to know when to say something to somebody at the right moment and interpret that.
Yes. And you know what? It's really funny because the daughter probably said, "This is my opportunity to get this message to my mom." And it makes me wonder, how much do these spirits have to influence that certain people end up sitting next to other people?
Well, can I give you another example?
Okay.
So that aunt that I talk about, I was at the casino with my mom on July 4th, and I was gambling with my mom. First time we went to the casino since COVID.
Okay.
And I'm gambling, and I think to myself, oh, I wonder how this person's doing, the person I'm thinking about.
Right.
As soon as I thought that, the casino announces that person as the winner of the $700 bonus prize for that hour.
Wow.
And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? I didn't walk up to the person because I couldn't find them in the casino. But my point is, there's so much synchronicity that happens with the spirit world where they create these not coincidences. They create these moments for us to reflect, pause, and appreciate what they can do on the other side. And I believe that we do have spiritual protection and spiritual work from the other side, and they make it known. And you will sense that when you can see it and be aware of it.
Well, you know what? It's almost, and the reason why I said it is, I'm thinking to myself that the story that you said about this lady who's going to this cottage, which she's selling, which means probably after that trip, she wasn't going to probably return.
Correct.
Okay. And here, who ends up sitting next to her? You, not just you, a person that can actually be able to listen to her daughter and impart this message.
I believe heavily. I believe in synchronicity more than any other life force that exists. Synchronicity happens every minute of my life. I believe you and I met through synchronicity. I believe when I have people call me for readings, and they will talk, or they will ask me life issues that are exactly on point with something I either went through earlier in the year or something I have some deep wisdom about. And I gain wisdom when I give readings to people. There are things I struggle with in my life privately. And then the next thing you know, I'm reading 3 people with the same issue. When I had cancer, I had multiple people come to me with cancer diagnosis issues while I was going through it. And it helped me. Me giving them the reading information I was reading for them and providing the reassurance and clarity guided me. Because while I
you know what? There's God, what's her name? She's a medical intuitive.
Right.
She used to listen to her a lot. What was her name? God almighty. She's a doctor. As a matter of fact, she's a PhD and a doctor of psychiatry.
Wow.
Oh, Marlene. God, she's very well known. She's been around for a really long time. But anyway, and her name will come to me in a moment.
No worries.
And she would say, I would listen to a lot of the podcasts she was on, where she would say, I always pay attention to things that are going on around me. But not even so, even outside of a reading, as in if I see something or certain things, like, in other words, she's saying basically that the world around you is basically trying to talk to you all the time.
Always.
Through symbols.
That's synchronicity. 100%.
Through something like, she was one time, what was it that she was saying? Like, in other words, but you have to learn. In other words, if you look at it, just look at it. It seems like an ordinary thing, but if you look at it through the eyes of, okay, I'm seeing this, for some reason, or something is trying. It doesn't have to be earth-stopping either. It's not like, you're going to get this profound message.
I got an example to tell you.
Go ahead.
During the pandemic, we were all struggling, and I went through some depression moments, mental health awareness, and I remember it was a Thursday, several months ago, probably last year. And my grandfather came to me in the morning of that day, and he said to me, "You're going to get some signs today that are going to give you some messages. So pay attention. You're not down and out. You're not failing. You're not going to fall apart." So literally, I was like, "Well, what sign am I going to get? What sign?" And it's very subtle, right? So I'm sitting there, and I'm doing my daily deeds, and all of a sudden, I get a call about a new referral from my law firm, and I was like, "Okay, cool, a new referral, a new case, right?" Okay. Then I got 10 minutes later, I got contacted about a prospective guest for my show. Right. Okay. And then the third one was exactly 10 minutes apart. Within a half hour, these 3 things happened. The next thing was I got a request for a new reading for being a psychic. And I sat back for a second. And I'm like, "Grandpa, thank you." He basically told me, "You're going to have 3 signs that show you synchronicity to let you know you're not failing. You're not down and out." So I got new business in all 3 areas of my life at that time within a half hour, when he told me several hours earlier when I woke up, "Pay attention today. There are signs that are going to show you that you're not down and out and things are going up." And he was right.
And this is the kind of thing because sometimes, and believe me, because I consider myself a subconscious behaviorist, and I know the powers of the subconscious mind.
Oh, yeah.
But these are things that you couldn't, because sometimes we act on subconscious information, and it might look happenstance, but in reality, it's because we know it. But when it's something that comes to you or happens to you, there's no way it's your subconscious mind. You
know about angel numbers, right?
Yes.
So I'll give you one last example.
Go ahead.
So about a year ago in January of last year, 2020, before COVID happened, I was at a crossroads with my law firm, and I was debating if I should fight one of my former business associates to try to get fees on a case that I knew I was entitled to, or if I should just let go of it. It was a substantial recovery. or if I should let go of it and pursue new things. And I kept getting this nudging feeling for like 2 weeks, let go of it, pursue new things, let go of it, pursue new things. But I didn't act on it. So then I finally decided to go to sleep because something was picking up, like negativity from my old business partner picked up, and it was heating up. So I had to make that decision, like get off the fence, make your decision, hire a lawyer, fight him for the money, or just say, go enjoy yourself and I'm going to do my thing.
Right.
I fell asleep. I prayed and I said, give me guidance, Grandpa. Give me guidance, God. Give me guidance, universe. I fall asleep. I wake up at 5:55 a.m. Now I have 2 parrots. My one parrot made a really weird noise at 5:54 a.m. when I got up. And by the time I went over to check on her, my alarm was set for 6 a.m. because I had to drive to the other side of Florida to do a deposition. So I got woken up 6 minutes early before I had to get up anyway. And I go to check my bird because she made a really weird screeching sound. So I jumped up to go check on her. And I walked over to her cage and I noticed she was still sleeping. And I'm like, wait, what is this? And then I looked down at my alarm clock and it was 5:55. Right? So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So then I go downstairs to the dryer in the garage to get my clothes out for work for that day. And as I did, I said, Grandpa, I'm going down the steps. 5:55. I looked it up. It means don't let go of the past. Have faith in the future that new things will come, new opportunities, new door, whatever. So I got that message. Then I go down the steps and I said, Grandpa, is that what you really think I should do? I'll follow your guidance. And he always left me pennies. He still does. He always leaves me pennies from now. When he was alive, he had a lot of money, but he acted like he didn't because of the Depression era type thing. Right. And he had hundreds of pennies that he would carry around and jostle in his pocket. So anyway, my family knows that when my grandfather sends us messages, there's a penny associated to it. And you know, for a definitive exclamation point, he's telling you, go with the flow, do what you got to, do what you're feeling. I went down to the washing machine, and a year and a half earlier, I seized the engine of a prior washing machine because I left change in my pocket. So I don't leave any change in my pockets anymore. In fact, I have a sign in my garage next to the washing machine that says, check your pockets. A friend made that for me. So I go down to get my clothes out of the washer, put it in a dryer, and there's no middle thing there in my washer because it's a new washing machine. And there's a penny heads up right in the middle. I'm like, I know for a fact I have to let go of the old, let the new flow, and go for it. And you know what? That was the best decision I made. It was right before COVID happened. I didn't have to pay money to hire a lawyer, fight a battle that I didn't need to fight. I let go of it. I surrendered to it. And now I have had many opportunities because of the new energy.
There you go. But see, the thing is, that happens to people more often than they think, but they're not paying attention. You see what I'm saying? Or they feel like, it's just like, it can be that simple. And sometimes it is if you're really listening to what it doesn't matter. And I remember now the name of that, her name is Dr. Mona Lisa Shultz. Okay. And she's last time I checked, I think she was living up in Maine, but she does podcasts and she's a medical intuitive, very good one. Oh, and wow. I personally have had a reading with her. And it's really funny because she will even talk about when she was working in the hospital and things like that, how she says that she had certain nurses that she says, I knew that they were psychic because when these nurses told me something about a patient, like, I got to keep an eye on so-and-so. And even though their condition hadn't changed, there was nothing to say, okay, well, she says, I knew it. She says, there were a couple of them that I knew that when they mentioned something to me when I was doing my rounds, sure enough, this person was getting ready to pass away. Wow. And, these, and it's almost like what you want to call unofficial psychics.
Of course.
Because these nurses are just doing it as part of their job. And she was asking, well, is there something wrong? Is something going on with their condition? Or what made you say, no, but you need to keep an eye on so-and-so. And she says after a while, she says, oh, okay, she would pay attention to what they were saying because of that. And then she also goes on in her personal life, how she says, I pay attention to synchronicity, but there's other things around you that sometimes you have to interpret because it relates to what's going on for you in your life at that moment that you might be thinking about. And that all of a sudden you look at it, and if you look at it from the point of view of either have a question or I'm wondering or I'm worried, all of a sudden you look at it and it's like it's trying to tell you something. Absolutely. Symbolism, things of that nature. But
I'll say
that's a great story though about your grandfather with the pennies though.
Thank you. It happens all the time. In fact, I'll take pictures of it. Another example, I was deciding whether or not I should move to a larger office space or stay in my current office space. And I was kind of on the fence about it. And I went downstairs to get a drink, and there was a penny right by my tire of my car. And I was like, okay, Grandpa, I'll get the larger space. And then I downsized a year later, right before COVID happened, a few months before. I was debating, a smaller space opened up, and I'm like, should I go down to the smaller space? And the same thing happened. Another penny appeared. I went down for the smaller space. Next thing you know, COVID happened, and I made a
you're like, whoa,
a really good financial decision.
Isn't that? It's incredible.
It's powerful.
Sometimes that,
it's
people
powerful.
don't realize that but, and I'm going to say also, sometimes people have flashes of intuition, and sometimes they make the wrong decisions, or what they think is the wrong decision. But they, you know how everybody always goes down the what if tunnel. What if I didn't do that, or what if I didn't say that?
Plague our minds, and I tell people always ignore those what if thoughts. They're not going to help.
Well, everybody always assumes that if you would have done something different, it would have been a better outcome, and that might not be the case.
Exactly.
You could say, "Oh, if I would have done or said that, or if I would have married so, whatever the things be," and you're always assuming that grass is greener on the other side, and that's no guarantee on that. I'm telling you, there isn't.
It's not usually.
Sometimes, yeah, but I mean, life would be boring if there was. I'm gonna date myself. There was how there's certain Twilight Zone.
I used to love those shows
that were very popular. Like the one with William Shatner and all that stuff. There was one where it's he's a thief, and he ends up in this place. And and it's like a pool hall, like a place, and he's just there's a guy that comes up to him dressed like a butler kind of, and says, whatever you want, whatever you need, whatever. So he's like, all these beautiful women, drinks, he can play pool. He's like, but when he's there, all the women want to be with him. He never loses in a pool game. There's nothing there. In other words, so after a while, because he got and the thing is, in his mind, he was robbing someplace. He gets shot at, and so he's thinking he died and he's gone to heaven. And so after a while, he comes back to the guy who greeted him, and he goes, "Hey, I thought this was heaven being heaven. Supposed to, yeah, it's great. I get everything I want and the women, and this is like my dream, but yeah, I'm not really happy." And the man turns around and says, "But who said this was heaven?" In other words, there was a torment in getting everything you want with no challenge. In other words, and my point being that sometimes when things don't go your way, or that you said, or people don't forgive themselves for making the wrong decision, it's like, well, but maybe sometimes it's because that's part of what needs to happen to you in your life.
Learning experiences.
Okay? Because if everything went your way, after a while, believe it or not, like you'd be like, okay, well, what do I try hard for? I know I'm going to do great.
I had
no challenge.
You're right about that, and it's all about the life experience and how you view it, right? How you perceive what happens to you. Some people could have a really hard time accepting a difficult situation and learn how to expand beyond it, where other people get stuck in it, hung on it.
Sure.
People who can really, I think that's one of the variables in life that we all realize exists, but we don't want to accept, is the change of life.
Oh, yeah. And anybody that's talked to older people, regardless of, what kind of person they are, but they kind of almost consistently, I tell people, whenever you talk to older people, when I mean older, like octogenarians,
wow,
late in life, the most regrets they usually have is about not having done certain things,
sure.
like being scared of it, or it's embarrassing, but people are they get so, and they'll tell you that if I would have known, I would have just done it, whatever.
Exactly.
If it came out great, and if not, well, whatever. But I regret more not having done it.
Well, and that's the bucket list aspect, right? To make sure you live your best form and your best. I think one of the things with the pandemic that really upset a lot of people was that they got robbed of a year of their life where they didn't get to do a lot of their dreams. And then, people are dying from certain things. And it's so it's like, I feel like what you can do with that is try to like live the best version of yourself every day. Even if you're in your house and you're not going anywhere, there are things you can do that elevate your vibrations, elevate your mood to keep you at the best optimal part for yourself.
Sure, sure. I mean, my granddaughter, she went through her whole junior year of high school, which I said,
Mm.
thank God it wasn't your senior year because that supposedly is your great
Oh,
year,
all the landmark moments, right?
and
Common.
she was like tied in front of the computer because she did all her junior year basically. And the only thing is, and she was on the track team, and I mean, it just like high school wise,
It killed
but
it.
yes, and now she's all happy. As a matter of fact, she's spending some time here with me.
Nice.
She's ready to go, and I'm trying to talk her into attending a University of South Florida,
Very
which is
nice.
close to me. I'm trying to like get her like you don't have to pay for a dorm,
Yes.
because I have a cottage here on the grounds. I'm trying to like. She's my only granddaughter,
That'd be
but
amazing if you can get her to stay local.
oh yeah, yeah. And I go, well, what do you want to do, Elizabeth? She wants to become a geologist,
Nice.
of all things. But yeah, so yeah, it's stuff like that and a lot of times and I don't know if you've come across this, Jason, when you do psychic readings, especially when people come to you because maybe somebody that was close to them passed away, where they're resistant to the change of that they have to, I don't want to say let go because that's a bad word for it, but that they have to change in the sense of I have to live my life now without this person
It's hard. It's a very
because
hard
they
thing.
want to stay. In other words, they want to do what's impossible, which is have that same life that they had
Before.
before. And by this, I'm gonna say usually if it's an elderly parent, that's different because people are more okay with it in the sense because that's it more expected. It's when it's either a spouse or maybe a
Or a younger
child or somebody other family member that people get like they can't get beyond it. Almost like they feel like if I'm not forever mourning, it's like I'm forgetting this person. That guilt thing that goes on.
Oh,
Have
yeah.
you ever run across having readings where the deceased person, the spirit tells them, tell this person that it's okay to
Yes.
keep going?
Yes. I had a situation early in my psychic mediumship before I became an open psychic where I had a friend of mine at the time who was grieving her boyfriend who died in a motorcycle accident.
Okay.
And that was about 12 years ago. And I did a lot of readings for her as a friend. Like it was where it actually helped me become a better psychic. So I appreciate everything in life. But one of the things that happened, this happened for 3 years. We got really close. He came through me to her for thousands of times over like 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And finally one day he just like told her, you can move forward now. It's time for you to move forward. She had met someone new. She married the person eventually. It turned out to be his elementary friend from high school.
Wow.
He told her, I'm always with you. I love you. And you can move forward. It's okay. And interestingly enough, she's done that. So.
Right. Because I know, I want to say even in, whether it was a romantic, whether like that or whether there was a marriage where
It's hard.
People feel like, oh, if I move on, it's like, I know it sounds dramatic, I'm dishonoring the memory of this person, or
Yeah.
they think, well, it's and it's like, no, you're supposed to go on living.
The deceased loved one wants the person who's left behind to be with someone new and not to be alone. That's a common theme I get all the time.
Yes.
All the time.
But guilt, believe it or not, people sometimes guilt is a very different. People don't know I'm going to say this, even though it's good because that means you're not a psychopath. But guilt can be very destructive.
Oh yeah.
To the human psyche, and it causes a lot of misery when people let it get away. Too much guilt, that kind of deal.
Absolutely.
Yes, most certainly. And so I'm going to ask you the obvious. Haven't you had instances where the psychic bleeds over into your law practice?
I have developed the best ability possible in my mind. I do this, right? And I've had clients who are psychic clients because I don't tell the legal clients I'm a psychic. They'd have to figure that out on their own. And I go by a different pseudonym here. My legal name is not Jason Zook, the social psychic. So I'm Jason Ciafalo. I'm not hiding who I am. But my point is this. I've had clients who are psychic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, my psychic clients who I give readings for, who get to know me because they're repeats, they're repeaters.
Right.
Literally call me up and ask me for a legal question. And if it's not something I'm comfortable, I say, look, I'm your psychic. I'm not your lawyer. And I've had people on the legal side where they know I'm psychic because I'm more open about it because of my show and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people ask me, so like, do you ever do this in your, I'm like, no, because you know how I can tell you why it's no? Because there's no ethics rules that give me guidance that if I'm a lawyer and I'm a psychic, this is what I should do as a lawyer. So I follow that as guidance to say, lawyer, hat, take it off after hours, psychic hat. When I want to do show, podcaster, psychic hat. Lawyer comes in on certain things. Like I just had an amazing guest the other day who was a whistleblower, and I was able to talk legal stuff with him. But because of the solicitation rules as lawyers, and you can't solicit people you don't know, and you got to be careful what you portray. And so I operate, and I know it's not a perfect aspect of things because I'm still an open psychic and I do these things, but I operate basically under those parameters that for me to do everything I want to do, I have to just switch hats and do it as such.
And I guess also, and I know you're saying that and it sounds like you have the ability of getting very good boundaries, but have you ever done anything where that person is negative and you're being an attorney, you know what I'm saying? But you're like, I'm exhausted.
The energy, you're talking about clientzillas, I think. You're talking about clients.
That's what
we call them clientzillas. I love my clients. I love them all. Yeah, they're clientzillas. Like bridezillas. Like they will come at you after you settle a case and they will be like, ah, and you're like, okay, yeah, I've had that happen.
So I'm thinking to myself, because I guess because people don't realize, even with a boundary, the stuff people, how can I say it?
Their anxieties come through.
Right, exactly. You're like, I'm trying to talk here. This is business, not personal, but God, you're like, oh, it's like, let's keep this short.
Exactly. No, it's difficult. And I have to just keep those firm boundaries in place.
Yeah, it's people don't realize that that sometimes you even you do it even unconsciously, where you might not be actually doing it, but it comes through sometimes, especially when you get somebody that's got one of those either strong personalities or a lot going on. They're just like, what was it? Bugs Bunny. Oh
yeah. Yosemite Sam.
No, the other one, the devil.
The Tasmanian devil. I was doing
that. They're like,
yeah.
And I was like, and it's like,
I just summarize it. Clientzillas. Like, my psychic clients are my psychic clients, and my lawyer clients are my lawyer clients. I don't mix the two.
That is funny, clientzillas.
Next time you have a different client, you'll think that term, I bet you.
I know exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking. That it's the kind of thing that you go, I know.
You get on the phone with them, and they're normal usually, and then they go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. Like, you're like, whoa, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
3 deep breaths. Let's start over.
Yes, and and I don't know if it was with you that we talked about this, or it was another interview that I did. And I'm going to turn this around on the psychic side of this, because a lot of people think sometimes that a psychic should be very in tune, like, very put together because you're psychic. And I give the example of, I don't know if you're familiar with that movie Rose Red that was based on a Stephen King novel, where it's an older house, and a college professor, she's trying to prove a theory about basically that it's a sentient household, whatever. Okay. Several tragedies that happened in the house, whatever. But bottom line, she brings in a bunch of psychics to go in there. One of the guys is a real jerk, but he's one of the most powerful psychics in the group. Okay. And I tell people, that there's a lot of psychics out there that they're very psychic. They're extremely psychic. And they can be very disagreeable people. Because everybody thinks that because you're psychic, you got all the answers, or that your spiritual life is in tune.
Mm-mm.
And that's not the case.
Psychics are human beings, right?
Yes.
And there are unethical psychics, or there are moody
Yes.
psychics, or there are psychics that you don't want to invite to your party. Let's just be honest with you.
Right. Right.
Right? Or
And
you don't send them Christmas cards because they're not nice people, but they're psychic. I've had
yes,
psychics
I
like
did
that.
mention this to you in the
We talked about
last.
that,
It
I
was
think.
you. It was you that I said, because a lot of people think that, oh, that person's psychic. Oh, they're great. They're normal. They're nice. And I'm like, no. I've known a
Look,
lot of psychics that it's like,
I'll tell you this, because I get the benefit of being a lawyer and being a psychic. I've seen lawyers who should be put together, right? You go to law
yes,
school, you put all these things and you accomplish all these things. And some of the craziest people in this world are lawyers. Some of the most screwed up people in this world are lawyers. Some of the people who are imbalanced, they may have a successful law firm, but they're cheating on their wife, their two kids, one has
yes,
bulimia. Yeah, it's insanity what
yes,
you
I
think that
know.
you would try to project on the people who have certain jobs. But the reality is they're human beings like everyone else. So a
Right,
psychic,
because you have a
whatever.
behind the scenes. Right. Like we think, well, if you see this portion of their life, in other words, what's presented to the outside world, they look very put together or successful, like you said. And then
Exactly.
behind the scenes, it's like, it's like, all right.
I mean, one of the things I'm going to be doing for my show is revealing that, professional athletes deal with significant mental health issues. And that's coming with the Olympics, we've seen it, and football and basketball, whatever sport it is. These people are on a pedestal, and people think, just like we were just talking about this with psychics everybody's got human stuff that interferes with their lives.
Let me ask you,
be compassionate about it.
That you pointed out, and we're talking here, we're not talking injury related. We're talking about
mental
and I'm
health.
thinking all these, whether it's professional sports or, like the Olympics, I think, and it makes you wonder what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Is it that pressure that they exist? Some of them start, in that sport when they're children, basically.
Well, think about it. I don't know any athletes. I've never met any athletes, so I don't know anyone personally, but I've seen people on TV and I've watched, I've read about different ones, and you could see there are athletes who are like amazing on the field, but when you look at them personally, if you actually are able to peel back that onion and look at the person, they probably have the incapacity. They're like little children inside. They have the incapacity to connect emotionally with people or have stable relationships. They probably have severe anxiety issues, because I was just reading an article earlier, because I'm trying to prepare for some episodes on this topic because it's passionate to me. I'm really into it. But like these people who perform on the field for football or basketball or whatever it is on the court, they have significant pressure that an average person doesn't, that society doesn't even think about or contemplate, that what they go through is so significant that it could cause them to have severe mental health issues. That when they get done with their sport, they just collapse, they pass out, they struggle.
And they don't realize. I'm going to give you, because people don't realize that, especially, when you reach a certain level, you're basically your time is consumed with practice or whatever. And I'm going to give you an example. When I was doing hypnotherapy, I had a mom bring me her daughter. She's 16, but she had been playing tennis since she was a kid. Okay. And you could tell her she was being groomed to go into, professional tennis. She had been playing. She was a little kid. And her mom brought her in to help me hypnotize her, because she had been losing, but over very, things that supposedly she was a very, very good tennis player, but she was losing over stupid stuff. In other words, things, and her mom wanted me to hypnotize her to help her with focus. Because what else can you do with sports? It's basically what it comes down to is focus. Whatever type of sports it is, whether, it's tennis or team sport, it's all your focus. So I hypnotize her, and I'm getting this feeling that basically, and I didn't, you don't go into that because, it's not your place. But basically this girl really didn't want to become a professional tennis player. She didn't.
It was her parents' dream.
Right. It was, she liked it, but in other words, it was like she was basically sabotaging herself. Okay. Because in other words, this was an easier way for her to get out of that than to say to her mom, I don't want to do this professionally for the rest of my, which is, by the way,
girl, right?
talking about that, we were talking about the stressors, mental stressors that some of these athletes go through even when they're very young.
Of course.
You know, a lot of it sometimes has to do with expectations from authority figures, as in your parents, that how do you tell them, no, I don't want to be, and that they do stuff like that. And I worked with her for a while. And then I was trying to very gently break it to her mom. It's like, she's, you know, I think she wants to do it, but you need to let her, you know, take up a little bit of the pressure off so that the pressure's not helping her. In other words, okay. I was trying to like, you know, by the way, mom, you know, you're not helping any.
Oh yeah.
And then after a while, I as a matter of fact, I stopped seeing clients under the age of 18, even though her mom was there and she, you know, she signed on a basically a release. But it was to me, it was very sad when I was going through that, because I could tell that this young girl this was not what she wanted to do. But things like that, it's unfortunate, but it happens. And part of the, how can I say it? That's I don't think you have to be much of a psychic to pick up on what I did, which is, you know.
At least you figured that out for them, though.
Yeah. Well, you know, it happens, and it is what it is. As far as you know, because of what you mentioned. But anyway, Jason, I wanted to let me ask you. You said that are you, you know, you've got the podcast, okay, and you've got the YouTube channel, and what are you doing? Are the podcasts? Is it the podcast on YouTube, or is it a separate?
Yeah. For now.
Okay.
I'll tell you this. I didn't tell you this early in the interview, but I call myself Jason Zook, the social psychic, because I had a premonition dream in 2012 when I was coming back from Texas. I had a dream that I was in the middle of a green iguana type place, a bar with a lot of woodwork in it, and it was packed with people. And I was like, oh, who's here in my dream? And this woman with these, she had like dream catcher earrings, feathers. She turned her head and she said, oh, Jason Zook, the social psychic's here. He's filming for a show tonight. And at the time, that's what I did. That was my response in my dream. And then I woke up like, Jason Zook, the social psychic's filming for his show tonight. What does that mean? This is before I had a podcast, it's like 5 years before I became an open psychic. So I adopted the name Jason Zook, the social psychic, from my dream, from the premonition, because my grandfather's last name is Zukovich. That's my mom's maiden name. And he's the influential figure in my life. So I knew that this name was from a future me kind of thing. It was a premonition dream. And I since then have been like, the YouTube aspect of it is I feel like I'm either going to do something more with my YouTube channel in the future and it'll pick up, or I'm going to interview for like a reality show or something on TV someday. So your question about my YouTube is the default for now, where I'm using my creative energy to finally start creating things it's easy for me to do the podcasts and upload those video interviews. I find that it's actually better to have a video version of the interview, because your audience can actually see the facial and the whole complete picture of the interview. So for now, my channel is basically doing the updated podcast episodes from the last 6 months. I'm about a month or two behind between the audio and the video.
It is.
Well, I have someone helping me, and he's doing an amazing job. And I told him, don't get frustrated, or, you know, we'll get them out when they get them out. We're under construction right now. And so it's a fun thing, though, because I'll release my audio episodes and then I'll have a few videos I release during the week. So I look like I'm putting out all this content, but it's the same stuff
It's a delayed. You know,
I mean, I've done like 30 episodes in 30 days. I'm not saying I haven't.
Oh my God.
I owe that to podcast.
Where do you fit time in there to sleep?
You know what's funny? My spirit guides have just been telling me, podcast, do your podcast. And I've been finding these, like, you came on my show as an amazing guest, and I've been having these amazing guests just come on the show. And I'm like, you know what? The universe is calling me to do this right now for a reason, and I'm following it, and I'm doing it as much as I can, as wholeheartedly, because it's my passion right now.
Let me tell you, I agree with you. The visual helps, but you know what? The podcasting, I think, is popular because people sometimes it's just easier. You can listen to something while you're doing something else, or pretending to do something else.
Exactly. And it's a hobby, right? You could go listen to somebody anytime you want and listen to the show.
You're driving, you can listen to it, you know, and
I love it. It's been one of the best things that's happened to me in my life, to have my own show, my own podcast.
Yeah, And it helps, besides speaking to other people, I think that anything that helps people be entertained, especially when crazy things are going on in the
There's
world.
healing modalities. Laughing through a podcast or listening to something to get your mind off the pandemic, that's a healing modality.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so you know what, I'm keeping abreast. That's why I tell, people keep up with me is, hey, because I used to have a farm here before where I was at, and now here, and my chickens and my dogs, because before in my other setting, I used to have my office was behind me, and I had like a small bed, and all my dogs, you would see them in the background. Jumping up on the bed. You'd see them grab my stuffed animals and run off with my stuffed animals. And people were paying more attention to what was going on behind me than, and by the way, before I forget, what kind of parrots do you have? And the reason why I ask is that my husband has parrots.
Oh, wow. I have an African gray named Pepper.
African gray?
And she's a Timna, so she's a smaller version of it, and she's 5 years old. And then I have a Sunchi Conure named Peaches, who's very loud, small bird, very bright. I love those two animals. They got me through. They're spirits. They're soul family to me. They got me through the pandemic. They've gotten me through the last 5 years, and I am so connected to them. And I just love it. I love birds. I love parrots.
Yes, my husband has conures. He doesn't have. He has a blue crown. He has a bunch of them. That's his thing in Canaries.
I love them.
And before the other, people don't realize birds. They're very smart.
They're baby dinosaurs, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's Jurassic Park. It's like
absolutely.
They're like once upon a time that would have been a velociraptor.
I have like a double-decker cage that I put them in the bedroom, and when I do episodes, most of the time I'm working during the day. They're in the other room, and I make the habit when I get up that I'll say good morning to Pepper because she's the upper cage and she's the one that's vocal in the morning. And I got to remind myself Peaches is under her, because if I don't say hi to Peaches, you could tell she gets offended. Birds have personality, just like dogs.
They do. Yes, they do.
And so I changed it up. I greet Peaches first, and she gets all animated, and then Pepper. And so I know that they are just a part of my life right now at this point, and it's important that we recognize the value that animals.
And you know what people don't realize, especially the bigger parrots, they have a very long life.
80 years.
Yes.
Pepper can live 80 years, and I'm going to have to make provisions in my will for that. So.
Yes, people don't realize those are very long-living pets. Again, for my podcast listeners, Jason, where can they go to find your information about the show and the podcast?
For the show, you can go to, I guess it would be The Social Psychic, the letter D, www. the letter D for David, socialpsychicradio.com. And for anything regarding me being like intuitive psychic or anything like that, just go to thesocialpsychic.com. www.thesocialpsychic.com. I'm also on social media like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I have a group for both the psychic group of me as well as the show. And so they can find me on any of those. If you Google Jason Zook, the social psychic, I'll pop up.
There you'll be found. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Again, Jason, thank you. It has been wonderful to speak to you again.
Oh, Marlene, you're a treat. I am so happy we got to know each other. And I'm looking forward to having you on the show again in the future, because your background is fascinating to me.
Likewise.
And thank you for having me on here.
It's been great. I have so enjoyed this, and I want to wish you the best of luck on all your projects, and we'll be talking soon.
I look forward to it.
Take care.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Of course. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Wow. Yeah. See, I had spoken to him. What was it? I interviewed on his podcast like 2 weeks ago, something like that. And it was great. It was fantastic. I enjoyed myself because he's a very down-to-earth person. And, and we didn't get a chance to talk about it. He's also worked, with a friend of his about, he mentioned it momentarily about working on cold cases and things of this nature. And people don't realize, and with because a lot of people think of psychics and and these cold cases and things like this, and people don't realize that sometimes how can I say it, a lot of these cases, they become cold. Sometimes it's because for lack of leads. All right. How can I say it? If it's somebody that gets the remains are dumped somewhere, time goes by, it becomes disintegrated to the point maybe no body is found. or people that know things move away, etc., etc. And I'm going to say, a lot of police departments, sometimes if there's a disposition to ask a psychic for help, usually it's in other words, it's when the case is cold. It's when they've run out of options. They go ahead and they maybe reach out and try to get psychic impressions. And by then, again, you could have a psychic tell a detective, hey, you know what? And I'm talking, this person is, like he described, this person is buried in underneath the foundation, or in, basically encased in cement. That's very, very difficult, okay, for a police department to go in there, okay? And unless they had something else that I want to say, let's face it, something, and by the way, I wasn't kidding when okay, this is my little dog that's making so much. When sometimes very, very cunning and intelligent psychopath killers that know exactly, in other words, they're not these sloppy killers that kill and then they're like running around trying to figure out what they're going to do next. These are the ones that already know, I'm going to kill this person and then I'm going to dispose of their body, not just like throwing it down a ravine or wherever. I'm going to get rid of this person there's a building and they've excavated the foundation and they are about to lay that cement down. And I know that once that's done, I don't have to worry about it. And hey, cut it out. That's my kid, as in my dogs. My children are already grown up. Whoever that is scratching, cut it out. Psst, hey, you know what that is? That noise is, and I'm sorry to interrupt it. You know how when people spend a lot of money on Christmas and their kids end up playing with a box? That's my dog that has run into an empty box. And she decides that she wants to dig a hole to China, but through the box. Getting back to what I was saying. But anyway, this example that he gave, how difficult do you think it would be now for maybe those detectives to go back up and basically tear up a concrete floor to look for the remains of this girl, of this lady? It's very, very difficult. Even if the detective believes it, they would have to probably provide something really concrete in order to get the court order or whatever to do that. Bottom line, on the recommendations of a psychic saying, I feel this person's there, it's not going to fly. So a lot of times, unfortunately, a lot of these cold cases, they go cold for lack of manpower, lack of clues, and by the time they're willing to take the help of a psychic, a lot of the corroborating evidence, let's say, that the psychic could offer has disappeared. Okay. For example, the same thing. Let's say this is a crime where the body was dumped outside, not and maybe this spirit is telling the psychic, hey, you guys, stop it. They can find me in a shallow grave by the water tower, whatever. Well, what happens is, obviously, there's, one of the most immediate things, of course, is decomposition. Also depending on the weather, but let's say it's not freezing or anything. Decomposition, but then people don't realize you might get animals, depending on where it is, where the bones get scattered. Bottom line, that even if you have a psychic that tells a detective or whoever, you know what, this person can be found under here and her body can be, they could go out there and they'd be lucky, especially depending on how long that person stayed out there. They could not find anything, or they might find one little thing, and at the same time, it might not be, how can I say, it they could find maybe one sliver of bone, because by the time they actually looked for help, what was there that could have identified indisputably this is the remains of this victim have been scattered. It's deteriorated. It's gone. It's whatever the case might be. And the reason why also I bring that up is because for a lot of psychics or people that are intuitive or sensitive about this, sometimes you get very frustrated, especially when you have an intuition or you have this communication from that victim that you want something to be done about it. And sometimes it just doesn't happen because in other words, it's almost like something that you have to learn to deal with, because you realize no matter how much I try, how good maybe the information is, I cannot make this. In other words, you give the information and you learn to deal with the outcome, which is this might never get solved. Nobody might pay attention to me, or whoever's hands it comes into says, I can't do anything with this. I believe it. It sounds plausible, but I can't do anything with it. And the reason why I say this, I'm gonna, even now with police departments, even before that there was more personnel, in other words, all these cases that come in, we're going to use, let's say, a homicide unit. There's only X amount of manpower that they've got, and they get a case. And sometimes, like that show, The First 48, and it's true. Usually, your best indicator that you're going to be able to solve the case happens right away. All right, and it's not only because of X, Y, and Z, being a parent. It's that you're going to get more cases. You're going to get more cases. And usually the ones that have vague, how can I say it? They're not clear cut. There's more investigating, maybe more legwork. I'm not going to say all the time. Guess what? They kind of fall by the wayside, even though they get followed up on. In other words, there's only so many cases that a unit can handle. And usually it's the most pressing, how can I tell you? The ones that have more possibility of being solved that sometimes gets the attention that all cases deserve. Because in reality, all cases where a human being has been killed deserves, but that's not the reality of it. And being a psychic, sometimes giving information, you make your peace with nobody might ever look at this or take it seriously, or maybe they can't do anything with it. And or the other flip side of that, which is there's victims out there, okay, that will come to a psychic medium trying to tell them this is where I'm at because they've never been found. In other words, as far as police are concerned, they might, if they're lucky, they might be a missing person. But sometimes if they've lost touch with their family of origin, nobody might have even reported them missing to begin with. But as far as the police is concerned, this person is missing. In other words, they're not looking for the body or the remains, and much less a perpetrator, because there is no crime attached to that person. But you might have this, there's that, oh God, what's the name of it? That Hitchcock movie. And I know I know they've made various versions of it where, the person sees basically the crime of a murder being committed. And the person cannot do anything about it. In other words, and there's some psychic instances, okay, where you might be getting these impressions or direct communication from the spirit saying, this happened to me, or this was done to me, or this is where I'm at. Okay. Yeah, you could try going to the police, but the police might say, well, I don't show where this person is even missing. So what do you do with stuff like that? Or maybe what this spirit wants is release, as in, I want somebody to know that, you know what, I'm not alive and living on the other side of the country. And even that family that maybe that they were, how can I tell you, that they were distant from while they were living, maybe they want to be able to tell them, hey, tell them that this happened to me, or tell them that I'm sorry, because sometimes maybe, they made their own mistakes as far as, going away from their families. Or, hey, I want them to know that I was killed. Or that, and sometimes, and by this, I don't mean, because I've even heard of cases, when I say killed, it doesn't necessarily have to be as in a murder scenario, and I mentioned this, I think when I was doing the interview with Jason on his podcast, that there was this is back in the 1970s, there was a young man, teenager, he's in Texas, and he's running across this busy, like 6-lane highway, and he gets killed by a truck. Dies instantly. Doesn't have any ID on him. All right. Since he was just killed, they make a photograph him. They sketch him. The police, and there was in the jurisdiction of a very little town in Texas. I can't remember it. Little place. And they tried desperately to try to identify him and find his family. And they tried and they publicized it all over the place, especially because they had a very good likeness of him. Make a long story short, nobody comes forward. The people that of the town, basically everybody chips in and they bury this young man in a pauper's grave in the cemetery. And he was dressed like, this was the 70s, longish hair, jeans. Come to find out later on that through the efforts of some investigators and people at the Doe Network, where they catalog and keep cold cases on, finally I were able to identify him. They exhumed him and they took some DNA. Of course, remember back in the 70s, there's no way to match the DNA. But of course, recently, they were able to match him to DNA from one of his family members. They started looking at reports of missing people, and apparently he was missing from Mississippi. He was originally from Mississippi. His family lived there, and they reported him there. And apparently he was a wild child. And he would come and go with his family. And, remember the 70s also were famous for the hitchhiking stuff. And bottom line, he had even gone to jail. He'd come out. But his siblings, his mom had already passed away. His siblings says that every once in a while, he would always stay in touch with his mom. And he would come home, he wouldn't like totally. And then one day he just disappeared. They never heard from him again. And finally, they basically like verified that it was him through the DNA match from one of the siblings, which was alive. And they were able to basically, as much as that family can suspect that maybe something had happened to him, there's something there where when definitely, my brother, my son, whatever the case might be, didn't just abandon us or, hey, act like we didn't exist. They couldn't. And my point being that even as a psychic, sometimes there's victims out there that are not on the police's radar. Okay. Because they've never been found. Nobody's reported them. And when they find somebody, let's say like Jason, sometimes they come through and sometimes you have nowhere to go with it. You really, really don't. You really, really don't. And that's something you make peace with as a psychic because, contrary to, what we see on the shows and the movies, not everything ends up wrapped up in a bow where, the victim is found or, the justice is served, the perpetrator is goes to to the courts and he's judged and goes to jail and that's it. Fade out and the credits roll. No, there's a lot of times in real life that is not what happens. That is not what happens. But anyway, guys, thank you for being part of my audience. You guys are wonderful. I hope you like this show with Jason. I'm going to have links to his website on the credits of the show. And again, I urge you, his podcast is great. Plus, he does offer the services of a reading. And this is the thing, sometimes, from what I understand, he might be able to even give you a reading. It doesn't necessarily have to be connection with a person that's passed on. He does other types of readings as far as, maybe you're at a crossroads. God knows everybody's at a crossroads with what's going on around us in the world with work and school and life and the COVID and the that and the this and the that. And, a lot of people now are having to make profound decisions. How's that? Should I move? Should I not move? Should I go to this type of job? Somebody like Jason sometimes is a good person to go to. And by this, I mean, I think family are good and everything. But sometimes our family and or friends, how can I tell you? They're either too soft or too hard on you. How's that? They either go, yeah, do that, or they're like, oh man, that's a stupid idea. In other words, sometimes it's good to get a reading from somebody who really has no background information on you, doesn't have any prejudice or is favorable towards you, where you think, oh, what this, like my mother, like, yeah, my mother's going to tell me because of course, I'm her child, or, some type of feedback from somebody who's going to give you what the intuition tells them, from the universe, or what, to maybe nudge you in the right way, or even maybe look at an aspect that you had not considered. So that's why you go to somebody like Jason, not only for a reading to connect with somebody that passed away, but for other important decisions that sometimes it's good to get a little bit of help on. Again, if you want links to any of the shows, you can go to miamighostchronicles.com. I have links to the podcast platforms where the story airs on. But if you would like to hear any of the podcast versions without commercial interruption, I have a link there that will take you where you can either listen to the podcast on your browser or download the MP3 file. The reason why I say this is, the majority of the podcast platforms, and I know people sometimes have their favorite ones, you are going to get the interruptions for commercials, advertisements, and it is what it is. And if you have your stories, don't forget, I'm waiting to get more stories because let me tell you something. These last 18 months, a lot of people, there's a lot of spiritual turbulence going on. So I'm waiting to hear those great stories from people who contact me. I already had a few. And again, I'm hoping to bring out my next book, which is Hot Dame on a Cold Slab, Film Noir Murders #2, which is supposed to be coming out. Like I said, I'm aiming for September 9th. It's the #2 that, well, there we go, that comes out after this one. All right. And it's basically true crimes and just how weird people were even in the good old days. I know that sounds like, but yeah. And most of these stories, some of them got a little bit of press coverage, but usually it was just like now. It was, while it was going on, it got a lot of press and then it died away, but never like the famous, like the Black Dahlia or, the other stuff that, that books even now are still being written about it 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 years later. Most of these stories after the initial shock wore off, or they kind of died. They were supplanted by other stories. I think you'll enjoy it. Like I said, I'm coming after that. I'm going to work on another story for my Sybil Chronicles universe, and I've got somebody who's contacted me. I've had more than that they want the true crime, but maybe Old West style. Okay. An Old West true crime, weird storybook. Something, I'm percolating it in my head. So again, guys, thank you so much for being part of my audience. You're all wonderful. And please come back next week. I've got a lot of great guests lined up that we're going to have great conversations with. Take care.